It's International Podcast Day 2017. I'm Daniel J. Lewis, one of the co-founders, and I've got on the line with me for this next session, Alexander Laurin. I'll tell you a little bit about him in just a moment, but he'll be sharing a presentation on finding balance in podcasting and life. Have a great podcast by having a great life. You'll get to meet him in just a moment. International Podcast Day is made possible with our great sponsors because we do have expenses. Things cost to be able to bring this to you, to celebrate podcasting and celebrate the power of podcasts, whether you're a fan or a creator. So thanks to our sponsors, Blueberry, a full-service podcasting company where you can get stats, hosting, a WordPress website, advertising opportunities, and more, and get running in just a few minutes. Get started over at blueberry.com. International Podcast Day is also brought to you by Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, a full-service cafe with 2 working podcasting and video casting studios. The grand opening is today, so maybe they have this live stream going on over at their event, but you can learn more about them and visit them at studio21podcast.cafe. Thanks to The Messengers, a podcast documentary. It's a documentary that shows the incredible power and connection and relationships in podcasting. Get your own copy on iTunes and Amazon at themessengersdoc.com. And thanks to Podable, they provide a service to help you find just the right podcast for you. So if you're looking for something more to fill up your podcast app, then go to play.podibele.co. That's play.podable.co to learn more and start over there. And lastly, thanks to our bronze sponsors, the Audacity to Podcast, Modern Life Podcast Network, and Podbean. We couldn't do International Podcast Day without our fantastic sponsors, and more importantly, without you. So please make sure that you are sharing on social about International Podcast Day with the hashtag International Podcast Day, and send people here to internationalpodcastday.com/live to be able to watch the live stream, participate in the chat, and more. Now, our next host, Alexander Laurin, is also known as the Podcaster's Coach. He's a certified life coach, and he's a podcaster coach. He's currently hosting and producing his 4th podcast, The Podcaster's Life. And he has some great experience to share in talking about finding balance in podcasting and life. Have a great podcast by having a great life. So Alexander from Canada, thank you very much for joining us for International Podcast Day.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Gratitude to Daniel, Steve, and Dave Lee. Thank you all for making this happen, and thank you for having me. So my presentation is called, and I'm just going to bring this up for you, Have a Great Podcast by Having a Great Life. And I have a handout for you. If you go to my website, podcasterscoach.com/IPD, you'll find a handout. It's a Word document. It'll be a 4-page Word document, and you'll be able to follow along, and it'll be your tool that you can use to have a great podcast, have a great life. So I just wanted to share that. All right, I'm on. Sorry about that. Would you like to have a great podcast? Of course you would like to have a great podcast. Absolutely. Now, if you were to have a life with amazing relationships, could that translate into a great podcast? If you were healthy in your life, if your life was healthy, would that translate into a great podcast? How about your family, your work? If you went to your job, a lot of us have to do jobs. In addition to our podcast, if you didn't go to your job unhappy and were happy, do you think that would translate into a great podcast? I can show you how. I can share with you some tools that you can use. I think I have a great podcast. Honestly, I think I have the greatest podcast. Now, you must be thinking, this guy is totally off his rocker to think he's got the greatest podcast. I know. I go and I get these emails from PodTrack. The top podcasts in the United States are The American Life, Radio Lab, Things You Should Know. But my podcast, The Podcaster's Life, you know, it's not there. If the Radio Lab were like Neptune, or were the sun, then the podcaster's life would be Neptune. And I Googled that, and Neptune is the furthest from the sun. Anyways, I feel like I have the greatest podcast, and it's because I have a great life. I feel like I have a great life. I feel like there's so much balance in my life. I work on my life all the time, and it comes through in my podcast. I don't know if you notice this, but can you hear it? Can you hear it in my voice? Podcaster, having a great life will show through your voice, and it'll make it great, and you'll feel like it's great. So what I would like to do on today's presentation is really just give you some tools. And really what I'm going to give you is a coaching tool that you can use. And it's called the Wheel of Life. And I'm calling it the Podcaster's Wheel of Life. And what you can do is at any point in your life when things are not so great, or even when you just want to improve upon your life, all you have to do is just reflect on the major categories of your life. Reflect on the major categories, rate yourself how you're doing on these categories. And then when you find that there's something that you want to work on, when you feel that, okay, I am not balanced, I need to get this balanced, then you could take that area of your life and you could start making goals. Goal setting is so important to what your idea of what success is. Please take up goal setting. It's amazing. It's amazing. So on this handout, if you've downloaded it, you'll see that on the first page, there's a wheel of life. And I think Daniel will post it throughout the chat. You'll see a wheel of life, and there'll be a number of categories. You'll also see a podcaster's wheel of life with, it's more broken down as more like subcategories. You'll see an example of what it is, and you'll find a little area where you can write out your goals. So let me just pull it up. Okay, so here's the podcaster's wheel of life if you have it. So again, the major categories: podcast, health, financial, environment, family and friends, achievement and fulfillment, personal growth, career, and work. So what you're going to do on a scale of 1 to 10 is rank all of those. You don't have to do it now. You can do it throughout this presentation. If you feel inspired, you can go ahead and do it. I would suggest think about it a little bit. Have some quiet time, if you will, and just go for it and do it. Don't leave. Do it. You can do some of it here, but it'll get the wheel moving. Pardon the pun. So you'll see that if you are scoring yourself a 10, then that means that you're very satisfied with your life. Sorry, I just don't see my camera. Is my camera on? Stop sharing. Oh, okay. Sorry, I've got this technical thing going on. Sorry about that. First time user. You got it. Thank you very much. I've got it. All right, so the wheel of life. Let me go back to the wheel of life. Okay, so I have all these major categories. So if you have a 10, if you're scoring a 10, then you're fully satisfied with your life. If you're scoring like a 1, that's on the opposite. That's the extreme. You are not satisfied. Things are not going very well for yourself. So you take a look at that. And here's the example. I'm just showing you the full entire screen. Here's an example of someone's wheel of life. Now, this particular person, they have a 2 in one area. So when you look at their wheel, does this look like a wheel that's going to get you moving? It's going to get you balanced? Is it going to be moving you forward? Ideally, you want to have a wheel where the numbers are pretty close and it kind of looks like a wheel. If you have a wheel that's balanced, you're moving forward. You're on your path. You're on your path to podcasting success. You're moving forward. You need a round wheel. You need balance. You need a wheel that's going to move you with motion. Look at this wheel. This wheel. Now, let's just say this is a snapshot of someone's life on this particular moment, on this particular day. Now, there's an area here that's 2. they have to work on this wheel. If they persist like this, they are not going to be moving very quickly. They're not going to be moving quickly at all. It's going to be very, very difficult for them to achieve their goals. Maybe they'll get there, but it's going to take them forever. So ideally, this person would work on this area where there's number 2. Maybe they want to work on number 4 and number 5, whatever they're inspired to do, whatever they're inspired to do. But that's an example of what the wheel of life will look like, could look like if you need to work on it. All right, I'm back. Okay, I'm figuring it out. Awesome, awesome. So I'd like to tell you a story of myself, a little story that really got me going on this path. And it works in terms of personal growth. So in my personal growth, there was one particular day where I made a significant change in my life. And I just started podcasting. I was working on my very first podcast, and it was called The Habs Life. And I was doing this with my cousin. I really wanted to get into podcasting. I just knew in my heart that I would love to do podcasting. So I set this podcast up. I learned everything on my own. I called my cousin. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. We're already talking about hockey for an hour. Let's podcast. So I did it. I got this podcast going with my cousin, and it was a lot of fun. But it was about hockey because I was watching hockey all the time. Like last year in the NHL, it was a condensed schedule, and hockey was on like every 2 days, it seemed. So since I had committed to this podcast that I wanted to do, I'd have to watch these games 3 hours a night. Then I would be staying up late, doing the podcast, another extra hour or 2. And I was tired. I was so tired. I was not getting enough sleep. I was just a wreck in terms of my fatigue. I had low energy. And one day I'm lying on the couch with my low energy and my low energy posture. And my wife comes in. She marches into the room full of excitement. She says, I've got it. I did it. I'm going to go see Tony Robbins. I can't believe it. And I'm like just lying there in my low energy posture with my low energy, watching whatever low energy garbage was on the television at the time. And I asked her some questions about it, low energy questions, and then she left the room. I thought to myself, it was just like within a blink of an eye. I reviewed so much of my life in a blink of an eye. And I came to realize that I wasn't really liking who I was. I didn't like this low energy business. I was full of low energy business. Now, mind you, I loved doing the podcast. I had a lot of enjoyment from that, but I wasn't sleeping. It wasn't really quite right. And my energy was really, really low. And I thought to myself, how can I get high energy like that? How can I have what she has? And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go with her. I'm just going to go with her. So I called her back into the room. I'm like, honey, please, can you buy me a ticket? I'm going to go with you. And she's in disbelief. Really? You're going to buy it? You want me to buy a ticket? Okay, I'm going to go buy a ticket. So she ran out and she bought a ticket, and she came back and she told me, all right, you're coming with me. So I lied there in my low energy posture, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell did I just do? I just committed. I guess I'm going to be making a change. Now, when it comes to goal setting, now this is a good example of goal setting. So, and the wheel of life. So I had this area of my personal growth. I don't feel that I was developing. I was not cultivating my mind at all. And I was just had all this low energy from it. So I made this goal to go see Tony Robbins with my wife. Now, what was going to get in my way? It was about a month away before this conference was taking place, and I knew that I have certain habits, a certain disposition, a certain identity, I guess, and I knew that I would find a way to back out. I knew that I was going to get cold feet, my shyness would take over, and I would find someone else to get the ticket. So I knew that. I recognized it right away, and I thought to myself, okay, how am I going to overcome these obstacles? Which is like the second major piece of goal setting, discovering what your obstacles are and making a plan to eradicate those obstacles. So my plan to eradicate the obstacles was to stop really being myself. Not exactly, more or less to copy my wife, to use my wife as my mentor, to use my wife as my teacher, and just mimic her energy levels. And I kind of thought to myself, you know what? If I can just fake energy, maybe I'll get energy because I really need to do this. I don't like where I am right now. And you know what? It works. If you want to just mimic high energy from people, you can just get that high energy. You can create that high energy. And it's a lot like smiling. I'm telling you, if you are unhappy at any point, you smile. You put on a big smile on your face, and I don't know, it's like the chemicals or something, the chemical reaction of your cheeks or whatever, I don't know. But if you're not happy and you smile and you fake that smile and you keep that smile up there, you're going to find that you're going to be pretty happy. It's just amazing. So the same thing with energy. So I faked energy, and that was my plan. I was just going to fake energy. And I already took that step. I got her to buy the ticket, so I was all set to go. So when the time came, and it was Tony Robbins' time, and I'm there, and I'm like, okay, I'm practicing my high energy. The old Alexander wants to come in, but I'm practicing my high energy. And we had a great time when Tony Robbins finally came. I don't know if you've ever seen Tony Robbins, but it's like a rock concert. Everybody's losing their mind. It's crazy. It's like just insanity. But I participated, and I screamed and I yelled, and I had a really great teacher. I had two great teachers there while I was there, and I was trying to transform my life a little bit. I had my wife to my right, who was all over it. She was freaking out and having a great time. And then I had this guy next to me, this stranger. He was like that too. He was freaking out. And then he brought his friend, and his friend was like kind of like this and like really reserved. And, you know, he wasn't participating. And I looked at this guy and I'm like, that's me. That's me. That's who I normally am. So I looked at him, and he was a great teacher. And I'm like, I am not going to be that guy. I am going to be a guy with high energy. I want to grow. It's time for me to grow. It's time for me to grow. So I think I put this on a slide here. I'm going to go back to my slides, and hopefully I won't. All right, I'm just going to get faster and better at this. All right, here's my slide. Personal growth. So this was an example of what a goal can be by looking at your wheel of life. So if you identify personal growth, if you're finding that you're low on personal growth and you want to make a plan, you want to make a goal out of it, all you have to do is take the goal. So my goal here, as an example, was to go see Tony Robbins with Kim. My obstacles identified were myself. I can't keep thinking and behaving the way I am. I have to do something about that. And my action step, well, my action step was simply to get her to buy me the ticket. That was it. Get the ticket and just go ahead and have high energy. All right. So when it comes to personal growth, you have to ask yourself questions, a lot of questions. So ask yourself, are you developing? Are you growing as an individual? When I think of personal growth, to me, I look at it more like, am I cultivating my mind? Am I moving forward in my mind? Am I learning new ideas? Am I developing? Am I growing? And podcasting is amazing for that. If we're all listen to podcasts, do you find that helps your personal growth? I'm sure many do. But ask yourself a lot of questions. If you're not there, if you're not quite there and you want to take it further, I don't know where you are. We're all different. But if it's something that you feel that you want to work on, give yourself a score. Give yourself a score and take a look. Take a look at what it is. And the first thing that comes into your mind with your score, if it's something you want to work on, make a goal out of it. It doesn't have to be a big goal. If you've never done goal setting before, make it something small. Make it something attainable and build that momentum of goal setting and moving forward. It's amazing. So take a moment. Give yourself a score. Think about it. Think about it a little bit. If you can't do it now, do it later and come up with a goal. And just remember all those components of the goal. Okay, so there's another component, which is health. Health is a huge, huge, huge one. And, you know, myself, I never put a lot of thought into my health, you know. It's like when I'm up and down when it comes to health. You know, I can I'll go to a mall or something and I'll see my reflection in the windows, and then I'll start to notice that my butt is getting pretty big. And then at that point, when I finally see what my body looks like, I'm like, okay, I better go to the gym. So I'm always often up and down, or I used to be up and down all the time. And I don't know what it is about health that we don't really pay all that much attention to. We really don't want to, it's the last thing that we want to pay attention to. We're so busy and so more preoccupied with other major parts of our lives that health seems to always take a back seat. And I'm not entirely sure why. And I never really attributed my health to my unhappiness. I'll share something with you. My son, he had autism. Well, he has autism, but he contracted autism at about 2 years of age. We didn't know what was going on at the time. Something was off. And it took till like about when he was 3 years old, we had him diagnosed. And so he got slapped with the label of autism. And it was a disaster. It was a huge disaster. It was a major disaster. Even when he got the label, every day was a disaster because we didn't know what we were doing. We've never had any of this experience. This was never on TV. I never learned anything about autism, but it was a major, major challenge. And I didn't really take care of myself very well. I was stressed out all the time. Especially when you're stressed out, it's really important to pay attention to your health. And I didn't do that. I didn't do that very consistently. So I just wanted to share that piece because I think that at the end of the day, I could have handled that much better if I would have just paid a little extra attention to my health. When I started this goal setting, when I started moving forward with my life, and it was time. I'm doing goal setting. I learned so much about goal setting. I'm changing my life. I'm changing my focus. I'm changing my career. I took a look at my wheel and I looked at my health and I looked at everything else. And I thought to myself, what is the one thing that I can do to improve my health? What is the one thing that will could potentially change my life? And it's all in my health. Now, everyone is different. Of course, everyone is different. For me, sleep was one thing, but another thing for me was drinking. I love beer. I love beer. I love beer so much. But as I've noticed that as I've aged, my consumption of beer has a really negative effect on me. And I have the same habit. I had the same habits since I was like maybe 18 years old. I mentioned hockey. And with hockey, if you watch hockey in Canada, every second commercial is a beer commercial. And if you're a young man growing up in Canada and you like hockey, you are probably drinking. So I kept that pattern going on and on and on. Friends come, friends go, things change, whatever. Children come, doesn't matter. Still drinking beer, still watching hockey. Now, I never got drunk. I never got drunk. 4 beers tops. 4 beers tops. So it doesn't sound like a big deal, does it? I'm watching a game. It's my little escape. If my team wins, I'm really, really happy about it. And I'm having a few pints and then I'm going to bed. Sounds fine, right? Go to bed, turn the lights off, go to sleep. Maybe I'd go to sleep right away. But in a short amount of time, I would wake up. I would be really hot. My body would be like working overtime. It's like just working to get the alcohol out. I'm parched. I'm dehydrated. I'm so dehydrated. I don't feel good. I have to drink. I have to get up in the middle of the night constantly to go to the washroom. And I wake up in the morning and I feel terrible. I feel terrible. I probably have a headache. I have to take Tylenol consistently. And I've got all these little children. All these kids, they get up nice and early. They're so happy to be alive. They just want to live and be alive. And here I am, sick, dehydrated, trying to get over a hangover from 4 beers. It's insanity. It's insanity. So the best thing that I could do for myself, I looked at my wheel. I scored myself fairly low when it came to health, and I came up with a goal. My goal, the first goal that I ever made, was abstain from beer for 1 month. What's the big deal? 1 month. If you can't abstain from beer for 1 month, hey, maybe you got some bigger issues there. But I mean, like, come on, 4 beers a night. Okay, abstain. I'm going to abstain. All right, so I made it's my goal. This was my first major goal. I'm going to abstain because I thought it could improve everything. And what were the obstacles? The obstacles to me achieving my goal, of course, were me. It's me. I'm the big obstacle here. Because you know what? I love instant gratification. How about you? Do you love instant gratification? I love instant gratification. And when it comes to instant gratification and beer, I am all over it. So I knew that I had to do something about this instant gratification. What am I going to do? I'll just go out. I'm self-employed. I've been self-employed for like 15 years. I don't have to report to anybody except for except for my wife. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go to my wife and I'm going to tell her, I'm like, look, hon, this is what I've decided on this goal. I'm going to abstain from drinking. I'm not going to drink for a month. And here's my bank card. Here's my credit card. Here, we got some cash on hand. Take it. Just get rid of it so I don't see it, okay? And then this way I'll have actually no way of getting alcohol. I can't order it online. So this will be good. And that was my first step. My first step was really to tell her what I was doing. And I had those obstacles in my mind, and I was all over it. And that was my goal. So if you want to take a look at what it'll look like on the wheel, here I was with health. So I gave myself a low score. What did I do on here? I think I gave myself a 5 here, but it really was pretty low. It was very low. And it was obvious that I needed to work on it, despite my thinking of it's not a problem. I love hockey. It's my little escape, but forget it. You know, it was like, okay, I need to change. I need to do something a little different. So, whoops, health. So here's my goals. My first focus goal, or my second goal, abstain for 1 month. So I got the goal, and the goal came from the wheel. The goal came from my score. What were the obstacles? Well, of course, the obstacles are me. It's always me. And my instant gratification desire. I got to have it. I got to have it now. Now I've got Amazon Prime. So that's a different thing. Instant gratification. And what are my action steps? My action steps were simply just to tell my wife and get her to help me out with this. Get her to like just remove all of the money, all of the free access to money that I had. All right. So what was the result of that? Let me tell you. The result of that was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I got sleep. I slept well for a month. I felt so good about myself. I finally paid some attention to my health, and my stress level was down. I wasn't snapping so much anymore. I wasn't cranky. I felt amazing, and I'm just moving forward with everything. I felt really good to be alive, and it was such a significant change. That little tiny thing, and it really propelled me. It really propelled me to having a great life and to having happiness in my life regularly, almost all day long at times. Ups and downs in life, but in the most part, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. So what I do is I do goal setting every month. So on the 30th of the month, I review how I did. And then after that, I just make a determination on what I want to work on the next month. So it went so well, I decided, you know what, I'm going to keep this going. So I made it my goal not to drink the next month, to abstain for 1 more month. And you know what, I am still doing it. I am still on that same goal. Now, I've kind of turned it into a bigger goal. It's like a 1-year goal for me now, because I want to change my habits. I want to change the way I do things. So it's just been amazing. So ask yourself some questions when it comes to your health. What is your health like? Now, health is about your body. Health is about your mind. So, you know, it's obvious with the body. It can be obvious with the body. It's like, what are you eating? What are you drinking? What are those things that are not giving you energy? What are the things that are sucking the energy right out of you? Then you've got your mind. Think about your mind and the health of your mind. I made this decision to stop watching violence on television because I realized I was feeding this to my mind. I'm feeding violence to my mind. So I thought, you know what? I think I want to take a little better care of my mind. I think maybe I'm going to not watch something terribly violent or gory, even though I know it's fake. I know it's totally fake, but I'm not going to really watch it. And then, you know, also the news, like, I will not watch the news at all, because it's like an hour of feeding myself negativity and suffering in the world. There's suffering in the world already. I already know that there's suffering in the world. I don't need to feed suffering into my mind for an hour. I don't need to do it. I don't. And I've learned that I can get news, the news that I probably should know. I know I can get it from Twitter. I know I can get it from Facebook. So why do I have to feed my mind? Anyways, that's my personal thing. But ask yourself, when it comes to your health, where do you feel that you are on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you fully satisfied with your health? Are you not so satisfied with your health? Is this something you want to work on? What can you do? You know, and again, it's your body, it's your mind, and even your emotions, say your mental health, your emotional health, the relationships that you're in. How do you rate yourself? Think about that for a moment. Think about how you rate yourself. Is it something that you want to work on? And think of one small thing that you can do. Again, if you're not a goal-setting individual and you want to start being a goal-setting individual, pick something. Pick something that you feel is going to raise your score. It's going to make you get on that path. Make your balance, give you balance in your wheel. Pick one small thing. Again, pick a goal. Think about the obstacles to that goal. What is going to get in the way of that obstacles? When you recognize the obstacles, then you could do something about the obstacles. You can pre-plan the obstacles and then take one step. One small step. You don't have, it's the one small step is not necessarily completing the goal. It's one small step to move you towards your goal. You cannot move forward by just standing. I have to take one small step if I want to move forward. So think about that one small step that you can do. Health is so important. It's so important. All right. Achievement and fulfillment. How am I doing on time here? Achievement and fulfillment. That was the next thing I wanted to talk about, achievement and fulfillment. Now, you're going to find that if you actually start goal setting, which of course I highly recommend, you'll find that your achievement and fulfillment will tend to be high on a fairly regular basis. Again, life is ups and downs. You can't get rid of the ups and downs in life. But if you're down and you work on your achievement and fulfillment, you're not going to stay down long. You will not. You want to decrease that time being down? Work on being fulfilled. Work on having achievements. The way I see achievement and fulfillment, it's more like action. It's action. It's check marks in those boxes. And it's that fulfillment piece. It's like, how are you feeling inside, you know? If you are a spiritual practitioner, this is fantastic for you. I learned through spirituality that if you have a faith, if you have a belief, if you have a certain worldview, and you keep that in your heart throughout your day, your fulfillment will be quite high. If you can attach that fulfillment to your podcast, you'll have a great podcast. You'll feel great every day with what you're doing. I highly recommend spirituality. Most of us don't pay too much attention to spirituality anymore, but if you have something, spirituality is not 1 day a week. It's 7 days a week. It's 24/7. Pay attention to your spirituality. One of my recommendations I want to throw in there. A life example that I'll share with you in terms of my achievement and fulfillment. I did this podcast, my third podcast, the Work Utopia podcast. I loved it. It was amazing. You know, everything was happening. I was doing goal setting and I had this podcast. I just started this podcast. So I hired someone. I hired a consultant. My wife and I, we hired this consultant. And I already knew so much because it was actually my third. But I thought, okay, consultant will be good. I'll learn some new things and I'll have some accountability. So I did my podcast and I loved my podcast. It was an amazing experience because I learned so much about myself and I learned so many different aspects of myself and I learned about life. I can't go on to tell you about all the things I learned about myself and life through podcasting. It's amazing. That's another presentation. It was absolutely amazing. So I'm doing this podcast and I'm loving it. And then all of a sudden, I'm 10. I'm 10, by the way. Achievement fulfillment, 10 with this podcast. Then one day, I'm a 5. I'm like a 5. And I'm like, it's like I ran into a brick wall. And this was like on one day, I was like so dissatisfied with what I was doing. So dissatisfied. And I had to take a step back. I had to take a step back because I was working a lot on it because I loved it. So I kept working at it. And I had to take a step back and I had to reflect. What was wrong? Why? How could I suddenly lose all this fulfillment, all of this feeling achievement, feeling like I'm achieving every day? How in the world did I lose that? So I reflected on this and I came up with, it was the consultant that I had hired. This consultant, a very nice guy, I guess. I'm sure the intention's in the right place, but I was giving a strategy. I was given a formula sort of thing. I was told 90 days, I am going to get 50,000 downloads. In 90 days, I'm going to get on the new and noteworthy, hallelujah, the new and noteworthy, 50,000 downloads. And I was given a script. And once I had my 50,000 downloads and my data, I can take that and I can go show people and I can get sponsorships and I can make money just off my podcast. So I'm doing this throughout the entire podcast and I'm feeling great about it. I'm going to make some money off of this because with my podcast, it started off, I brought my old type of work into there. I was bringing I was an executive sales recruiter. So I tried to bring recruiting into the podcast and it was something I hated. And that's what I learned too. Podcasts, I had love and recruiting, I had hate, and I couldn't get it to fit. It just wouldn't fit. So I had to get rid of that. And then I started to bring the career transition coaching because I had been doing career transition coaching since 2014. And I brought that in and that kind of fit a little bit. But my whole problem with career transition coaching is that I felt like I was a recruiter while I was doing career transition coaching. So I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about this? Because this is obviously wrong. Like this is not a smart, I didn't have a smart goal. Smart goal is something to consider. Smart, specific, measurable, realistic, attainable, time-bound. It wasn't realistic. Not for me, it wasn't realistic. Maybe it was for him, but not for me. And I thought, this is what is the problem. The problem is that I was really focused on this and I was crushed. 90 days had passed. I was crushed. I was 43,000 downloads shy. What the hell is wrong with me? I suck. I'm no good. I'm a terrible podcaster. I'm not going to make any income off of this. I'm terrible. All this negative talk was coming into my life. And I'm not a kind of person that uses negative talk at all. Hardly ever. Negative talk comes in, I'm in La La Land thinking about birds and the beach and stuff like that. There's no place in it, but it was strong. It was really strong. So I wanted to get back into achievement and fulfillment. I wanted to have what I had before. So what I ended up doing is I decided, okay, what is my goal? What is my goal to get my achievement and fulfillment back to where it once was? And I determined that I am going to start a new podcast. I am going to start a second podcast. Great. I'm going to do a second podcast. So what's in the way? What are the obstacles of me achieving a second podcast? Time. I don't have time. Do I really have time to do 2 podcasts? So I realized that it was time. Time was my biggest obstacle. And I just told myself, and I wrote it out. I'm like, okay, look, if you can't do 2, you have to drop 1, or at least you have to put 1 on hold. So that was my plan. And my first action step toward doing that was really just make the time. I actually put it in my calendar and I gave myself some time to come up with this idea on the second podcast. I pretty much well knew what I was going to do. I had a pretty good idea, but I needed to actually make the time. So here we go. So here I am. Here it is on achievement and fulfillment. My score was pretty low. I think I gave myself a 5 here, and it was crazy. I was 10 all the time. So my goal: have a new podcast, start a new podcast. What is going to get in the way of this podcast? Time. Time is going to be in the way. What am I going to do? What am I going to think about in terms of this podcast? So my first action step was really just to come up with everything, but write it out in my calendar. Get it out in my calendar. And I did that. All right. And holy cow, did it ever pay off? Did it ever pay off? And I was finishing up my my second my coaching certification, and everything just came all together with me. I knew that I wanted to work with podcasters. I knew that I wanted to talk to podcasters. I knew that I wanted to coach podcasters. I wanted to merge the things that I loved the most. And that was, I loved coaching. I loved helping people. And I loved podcasting. So I am having my cake and eating it. And the second podcast has really helped me get to that point. So it was amazing. It was an amazing idea. The other podcast, Work Utopia, it hasn't quite been pod faded yet, but it's probably going to get pod faded. All right. So I have a little bit more time. I want to show you the podcaster's wheel of life, the subcategory. Now you'll see it on the handout. Okay, I'm going back to this. Here we go. Now, you've got the podcaster's wheel of life. So you have, like I mentioned, podcasts, there's 8 categories. So there's one of those categories in the standard wheel of life and the full wheel of life is podcasting. So what I did is that I broke it down further into 8 subcategories. So these are the ones that I came up with. So you got your editing, you got your purpose, your content, your planning, your speaking, your relationships, the financial part, and the promotion. What you can do, if you don't quite know what exactly it is, and you feel that it's in podcasting, if you gave yourself a low score in podcasting, you could take it even further. You can look at all of these areas and you can rate yourself, give yourself a score on each of these areas. And you might find that'll help. You'll find that help. And I'll tell you, it helped me quite a bit because I came to the point where I was not enjoying my podcast again. And this current podcast, I was finding that I wasn't enjoying it again. And I couldn't figure out what exactly is the problem here. Why am I not enjoying this nearly as much as I used to before? So I went and I looked at everything. And it was really clear to me what my problem was. It was editing. I hated editing. I really hated it. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not really true. I love editing, actually. I love editing in short doses. I like the creative part of editing. 45 minutes tops. That's all I can take for editing. If I have to edit for more than 45 minutes in Audacity, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. So I recognized when I broke everything down and looked at all the different categories, I realized that editing was a major problem. It was a major problem. The score was very low. So I thought to myself, okay, how am I going to improve this? How am I going to make podcasting better? How am I going to move forward with podcasting? Because I can't keep going on like this because I'm unhappy about it. I looked at the editing and I thought to myself, well, you know what? Actually, what are you currently doing that's creating all this unhappiness when it comes to editing? And when I looked at it, I was editing in batches. So on my show, The Podcaster's Life, I interview podcasters. So I'd interview a podcaster and then I'd interview it and I'd download it and it would all be good. And then I would leave. And I found what I was doing is I was saving 1 day a week to edit. I would spend 5 hours in a row editing. And I hated it. I really hated it. It was really, really stressful, all that editing. So I recognized what I needed to do and I needed to make a goal. So I thought about what I could do is I could try, how about make this for a goal? Try to edit right away. Edit right away. Why save it all? I like editing. So there's, do something about it. So what is the obstacle for me doing this? What is the obstacle of me being able to get to this goal? So what I did is the obstacle was time. I work at home. I have my home office and often I interview people. In the summer, I was interviewing them really early, but for the most part, I interview them at night. So when I interview them at night, everybody is home. Everybody is here. So it was a time thing. So that was the big obstacle. So I went to my wife and I'm like, honey, this is what I'm going to do, okay? Because this is not working out for me. Can you please help me? Can you please help me? I am going to take an extra 40, 45 minutes and do editing after my interview. And that was it. So what I did is I told my wife, I made the plan. I made my goal. My goal was to try at least for a week. I made it a week goal. Try this upcoming week to do an edit right after the episode. And the obstacle in my way was my time because I have all these kids and they're pretty loud. So I need them in check a little bit. So the time thing. So I dealt with the time thing by just simply asking my wife. And that was really the first action step. I just told my wife about my plan, who, by the way, is the best accountability partner. Get yourself an accountability partner. Makes a world of difference. And I let her know. And sure enough, it resolved all the issues when it comes to editing. It resolved everything. So now I enjoy it. Now I have no problem with it. Most of the time I do it right away. Most of the time, depends. But it really has made a significant difference. So that's what I did. So you can do the same thing. All right. So let's go back to my slides here. That is really my presentation on the Wheel of Life. I'm not entirely sure if I have a lot of time to take your questions in the chat room, but I just want to really end off by telling you that you can have the life that you desire. You can have a great podcast. It's absolutely essential that you have balance in your life. If you have strong relationships with your family, with your spouse, your mate, or whomever, your children, your friends, that's going to make your podcast better. If you take care of yourself, you're going to have a great podcast. If you live a life of goal setting, you're going to have a great podcast. You will be fulfilled. It took me so long to figure this out, 25 years or something of trudging through in life, not goal setting, not looking at my life at a regular on a regular basis. So I implore you, download this tool. You don't need a podcaster's coach. You can be your own podcaster's coach. Download this tool. Take a look at your life. Turn your phone off. Be reflective. Look at where you are missing balance. Make a plan and start your goal setting. Start your goal setting. And again, make them SMART goals. SMART, specific goals, measurable. Make sure that they're attainable. Make sure that they are realistic, and give yourself a time frame on it. Give yourself a time frame. I do monthly goals most of the time, monthly goals. You can do weekly goals. I do weekly goals with my clients. If you go on my website, Podcasters Coach, you can book a free complimentary Wheel of Life podcaster coaching session with me. It's 30 minutes. It's complimentary. I can go over this Wheel of Life with you. No problem whatsoever. I can give you some ideas. I can help you out, whatever. It's all good. If you want to reach out to me, I'm at alexander@podcasterscoach.com. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. Go to my website. Everything you need to know about coaching is right on my website. My telephone number, call me. I don't care. Give me a call. Here's my phone number. If you want to talk, give me a call. I can arrange a time with you. And if you want to email me and send me your ideas, I'd be more than happy. I'll listen to you and I'll respond to you. Feel free to reach out. It would be an absolute honor to hear from you. I'm a podcaster. I love podcasting. Podcasting is a major part of my life, and I'm happy. And I'm done. All right. So I don't know if anyone. Do I have time? I think I have 1 minute, don't I? Do I
Got
have
a
time
couple
for anything?
questions. Yeah, some time for some questions.
Hold on a second. Okay, here we go.
This has been great, Alexander. I really appreciate the message here is take care of your life first, and then you can make a great podcast. You can't make a great podcast if your life is suffering. I really appreciate your focus on the accountability, on the discipline, on the balance, and great resource. I really appreciate this, and I'm sure many of the others do too. And your website again, podcasterscoach.com.
Yeah. And it's like, and I know I've heard you, Daniel, you've talked about depression in the past. And when you're depressed and you're not feeling well, that translates in your podcast. If you can go into your podcast and feel great and feel happy about all the areas of your life, it'll make a great podcast. It'll absolutely make a great podcast. I'm telling you, I'm proof. I'm not number one on PodTrack, but I'm proof. I love what I do.
Yeah. So get that great handout, or the handout. Handout terms get mixed up here. Get that handout over at podcasterscoach.com/IPD. Alexander, we really appreciate your being part of this. And thank you for
Thank you.
joining us on International Podcast Day from Canada as well.
Thank you, International Podcast Day, you hosers. See you later, eh?
International Podcast Day continues. We've got many more sessions still coming up later today, and you might be watching the replay for this, so maybe you know the spoilers already. But in the People's Choice Podcast Awards are coming up. We also have sessions from a couple of our sponsors. And speaking of our sponsors, thanks to Blueberry Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, The Messenger is a podcast documentary, Potable, and our bronze sponsors, the Audacity to Podcast, Modern Life Podcast Network, and Podbean. We could not do International Podcast Day and make all of this happen without the help of our fantastic sponsors. So please check them all out. Go to internationalpodcastday.com to learn more about our sponsors, learn more about how you can continue to celebrate International Podcast Day, and prepare for the next year if you're watching the replay of this and you missed International Podcast Day this year. So we have more sessions coming up. Keep tweeting, posting on social with the hashtag International Podcast Day, and send everyone to here, internationalpodcastday.com/live, to watch these live events, participate in the chat, and be part of this bigger conversation to celebrate the power of podcasts. We'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel J. Lewis.